Michael, you've obviously had a good summer from the look of you, fighting fit, raring to go.
Yeah, we've got a good break. Short holiday with my family, and then most of my summer was recovery from obviously hip surgery. So that's gone quite well. Quite pleased where I'm at the minute. Much more active on the training pitch than I was obviously towards the second half of last season. And yeah, it's been good. We've obviously been back now close to 6 weeks really. So yeah, it's been a good break.
And pre-season probably didn't go as well as you want in terms of results, which isn't great for the positivity of the fans. But you had a midweek game against Altrincham, and you've trained all week. How did that go?
Good. Listen, the players have the application's been really good. First of all, the training. The key to pre-season is to obviously get the players fit and get them organised and get them ready to play for the first game of the season. Probably most teams aren't ready by the first game of the season, if we're honest. You know, you have to. There's still a month to go in the transfer window, for example, which obviously complicates things in terms of having your squad where you want it to be. In terms of possibly players leaving, obviously additional players coming in. You know, obviously there's been quite a transformation in the squad. It's a much younger squad than we've had at any point, I think, as well. And yeah, I think, look, we're disappointed with some of the results in the games. We've tried not to read too much into that, if I'm honest. And we've played, you know, in these games, we've played with a lot of younger players for portions of those games, which is probably more than we would have liked to have done. But this week's been good. The players have trained well. The ones that we felt needed an extra 45, 60 minutes in the game against Altrincham, the likes of Dwight Gale, Aidan Flint, for example, they got that, and all of that builds up to obviously being ready to play on Saturday.
You've talked about the turnover in the squad. You obviously look at the end of last season towards what you want to change for this season. Presumably you brought those players in to be more athletic, to be more young, to want to work hard for this football club. How far are you from the finished article? I know you've said there's going to be a couple of players you'd like to get in, but we might have to wait for that.
Yeah, I still think we feel there's two areas of the team we're a little bit short at the minute, but to get the better players in those positions we have to be patient. They won't be players that we'll be spending money on in terms of a transfer fee, so again the options that are out there are driven a little bit by either the parent club or the agent if the player's a free agent. So those are all scenarios that we're having to be patient with. Ideally, you would love to have, you know, more players or your settled squad for the first game of the season. It just never works out like that. And but what we have is, you know, we brought 7 players to the club. We think that we've got those players at a good time in their career as well. That they're keen to prove themselves either at this level, or they've come to the club at a good time. You know, they're proven championship players, and they've come at a good point in time in their career as well, which I think is important. And you know, they fit it in with where we were financially at that point in time. Everything is driven not only by a choice of player, but you know, the finances that are available, and it's about making the squad as robust as possible within the framework that we have.
I'm sure one of the questions you're going to get asked tonight at the meet the supporters will be to do with financial fair play. How far are we from getting over this dreadful hurdle? It must be awful for you to watch all the improvements going around the stadium, the 5 or 6 million spent around the stadium, and you can't spend any money like that.
Well, yeah, look, personally I don't really view it like that. I must be honest, I think that the fact that the club is investing in the stadium is a good thing, because you know, at the end of the day, supporters come here, and it's important that the experience is as good as possible. We didn't go into the summer window thinking that we'd have a lot of money to spend. We were always had a kind of plan, if possibly we sold a player, that we could reinvest that money, similar to what we did when Nathan left. You know, that situation hasn't materialised. So I think the two things are separate in terms of what the infrastructure of the club still needs to be maintained and invested in, and you know, our job in his relation to is to get as strong a squad as we can on the pitch with the finance that is available. I can't really comment on FFP. It's there, it exists for everyone in the league, and really the answer to that question is probably out with my hands in relation to how close we are to, I wouldn't say be over it, but being comfortable with it, I think is the better way to describe it.
So on to the first match of the season, Millwall away. They don't get much tougher than Millwall away at the best of times, but apparently they've got a full strength squad and they're raring to go. We all know that the importance of starting a season well and gaining confidence. How difficult do you see this match?
It's a tough game. We were there, I think it was 2 years ago. We played Millwall in the opening game of the season. 0-0 draw. We felt we were a bit unlucky that day. We'd I think a penalty that we felt we should have got towards the end of the game. Jacob, I think it was Jacob's first start. He came off appearance. He came off the bench. So yeah, look, whenever you go to Millwall, it's going to be a tough game. So I think I don't view games in the Championship particularly differently when away from home. I think that an away fixture on the opening game of the season is always tough, regardless of where you go. And look, we've been drawn out to play against Millwall. We'll be ready to do that. We know that there's a familiarity about their squad. They haven't made a huge amount of changes to their squad. They lost obviously a key player in Jed Wallace. I'm sure they've tried very hard to replace that as well. But we believe we're capable of going there and obviously winning the game. Both teams won at home respectively last season, so it would be nice if we could reverse the trend and pick something up away from home.
The team spirit's very important in all games, and now you've got these extra players that have come in, and there's been a change in the squad. How's it gelled? How's the squad gelled? It's
good, yeah. We had a great week in Cork, where the players with a great training base with 2 on-site pitches, and it was quite refreshing to see. The players seem very comfortable with themselves. As I say, they're a younger group of lads, so that there's a few older ones who are obviously know each other well. The likes of Jagielka, Flint, Klukas, for example, are our players that are older players, and then the rest of the squad is essentially in their 20s and some in their very early 20s, and in the case of young Emery and Jack Griffiths are teenagers as well. So that's all part of it, and I think the key is that we've had no issues at all in pre-season with that aspect. I think the training, the players' attitude to the training has been first class, and as I say, we're happy with the group that we have. We're happy that they are focused. They want to do well for this club. They've come here because they've got that ambition, whether that's on a temporary basis or on a permanent basis. And it's a case of now getting the season underway and hopefully getting some results on the board, and obviously that might help us attract the 1 or 2 players that we think are going to help us obviously for the rest of the season.
With the 5 subs this season, will that have much impact, do you think, on the league generally, in terms of maybe people will put people on for impact subs more than they might have in the past, or to change technical formations?
Yeah, I think it gives you a lot more, I think, freedom as a manager. I noticed when we went from 5 subs to go back to 3 subs, you did feel more restricted, to be honest. You may make decisions as a manager to take a chance with the player. For example, if he's got a knock or a slight injury, can you start him, can you not start him? And all of those are factors when you have to think about what you might do through the game and the substitutions that you may have to make. Obviously, having 5 substitutions, I think there's 2 concussion substitutions as well this season, it gives you much more scope, and probably I think will help a lot when you have the 3-game week, which we have a lot in the Championship as well. I think it'll maybe give you more belief that you can start players again, knowing that they don't have to play 90 minutes consecutively over 3 games. I think that'll be a factor. But again, it's driven, the Championship is such a demanding league that I think a lot of it is driven by player availability as well. So, what we've tried to do is sign players that we believe will be available, players that they're a physical condition and in a place where they can play a high number of games this season. But certainly, I think the 5 substitutes also allows us to protect the players a little bit more as well.
When you talk about a young group, they're not necessarily leaders in that group, so there may be some leaders, you know them better than me, but you'll be looking for the older players to lead, and as such, who's going to be the captain this year?
Lewis Baker will be the captain of the club. There'll be then a group of senior players beneath that will consult with as well, so it's not just all on Lewis's shoulders as well. Obviously, Harry was a strong candidate as well, but given that his injury, I think Harry needs to focus on just getting back fit and getting playing without any additional burden. But Lewis has, got a natural leadership quality about him. You see that on a daily basis in training, and I think it's time for us now for other people to emerge as well. Not just to be the likes of those people like Jagielka, for example. Clucas, Flint's just at the club, has obviously got leadership qualities. We've seen that in previous clubs that he's played with. But we need, people like Josh Timon are very important players for us. We believe Josh Laurent has that leadership quality in him as well. And it's probably more difficult, I think. You're always looking more to your permanent players for leadership. It's slightly more difficult for loan players to assume that role. But I think that, we have enough in our group to make sure that the standards remain high, and that we're not just dependent on sort of one player to specifically ignite players in that situation. I don't know, maybe we'll see with Joe leaving the club as well after being here and being such an influential player for 6 years. Then I think we'll maybe see people emerge from that as well.
And very early on in the season, we've already had an injury, which is typical Stoke. How's Nick Powell coming along, and how's Harry Suter doing?
Well, next 4 weeks tomorrow, since he'd done the injury in the game against Leeds. So yeah, he's still probably 4 to 6 weeks away, I would think. He's not back training on the grass or anything. He's still with the medical team at this minute in time. His leg has been in a brace, but he's no longer in that brace. So he's making progress and doing everything that he can, but obviously it's unfortunate because he will have missed the opportunity to be fit in pre-season, which I think was going to be important to Nick. So it's always more difficult when you miss pre-season to get fit during the season, because we probably have to take a little bit more risk in terms of games when we drop him into. So we just got to assess that. But it was a blow to him and it's a blow to us that he obviously picked up the injury. It was just a tackle, so it's one of those things that you can't really avoid happening. And Harry's possibly, without I think a further 8 to 10 weeks away. He had a little bit of setback that he needed a small injection for, which we believe has helped him. And he's doing everything possible to be fit. It's a very frustrating process, I think, for Harry, because I think in his head he had possibly the start of the season as a date to be fit. Probably that was slightly unrealistic. I think cruciate knee ligament injuries are very, very complex injuries in terms of time frame. Sometimes players come back too quick, can easily break down again. Equally, we don't want it to run any longer than we feel is necessary. I think at this minute in time, we're probably somewhere around about 7 months since he did the injury, maybe slightly more than that. So he still went well within that time frame where he's made good progress. But as I say, the next 8 to 10 weeks will be crucial for Harry in terms of when we get him to return to play.
The next chapter starts now. Every football fan, every Stoke fan, everybody looks at what's open for their club. For Stoke, it's the league and 2 cups.
Mm-hmm.
On the blank sheet of paper now, what would you see as a successful season for Stoke City?
I think for us, the biggest frustration we've had in the last 2 years has been we've felt we're in a good position to challenge to be in the top 6, which obviously gives you a chance of the playoffs and promotion. We've had difficult second halves of the season, which have made that obviously the top 6 has then been out of our reach. And I think the nature of this league is such that you have to aspire to finish in the top half, because if you finish in the top half, you'll have a chance of the playoff going into the last few games of the season. And our aspirations are no different. Our aspirations are to challenge to be a top 6 team. Again, we have the 3 teams coming down. We look at West Brom and Sheffield United, who are still recently out of the Premier League. And then I think the rest of the league is very much there's a level enough playing field there. I think we saw that last season. There's always teams that possibly punch above their weight a little bit and get into the top 6. We feel that we're capable of that, not punching above our weight, but we feel we're capable of aspiring to be a top 6 team, and that has never really challenged. We haven't done that in the second half of the season, particularly the last 2 seasons, so hopefully this group of players can address that.
Michael, obviously you say the quick turnaround from the end of last season to this, is that going to be beneficial, or will it not in any way make any sort of difference?
I don't think it makes a difference really. You know, we've the football club never really stops, if I'm honest. You know what I mean? Recruitment doesn't start at the end of the season, and it doesn't, you know, start at the 1st of January. It's a constant process, and so the work that we've had and been going on, it's not just, you know, it's been going on for a considerable amount of time. I think that there's probably been less change behind the scenes in the football club, I think, in this off season. So there's been a consistency about that, which I think helps. And also just, you know, as I say, we've focused on the personnel really, on what we can get in terms of the level of the player, attracting the level of the player. And what you find, I think, in the Championship at the minute, if I'm honest, is that there's a lot of clubs in a very similar position financially. So we all tend to be chasing a lot of the same players. You know, everyone wants. We all believe that there's certain players that will help us over the line, and be the difference between being that team that finishes mid-table, being that team that can maybe struggle, and being that team that obviously can finish in the top 6. And so, you know, it's a very competitive market for those players as well. You have to sell your football club, and you have to sell yourself as a manager and as a coaching staff and a team as well. And that's where we've worked extremely hard. So no, I think we've been ready. When the boys came back in, we were ready. And as I say, despite results aside, we've been pleased with how pre-season has been.
And pre-season can be a notoriously bad guide in more ways than one, but expectancy levels, of course, and that applies to every team. But it's very difficult to assess your opposition first game because they have been in a similar situation, and you may have watched some of their games, but it's difficult to assess what they might be going to do different from last season, Michael.
Yeah, I think there's a difficult. You can't read too much into the games. First of all, I think what you get a feeling for managers and how they like to play, and consistently how they've played, you know, with that club since they've been in that position. You also can possibly look at, you know, the number of players, personnel changes that there is within clubs can give you difficulty as well. But look, I think we're as well prepared as we can be for how Millwall will present themselves on Saturday. I'm sure they feel the same about us. They'll have watched games, but they'll not know exactly. You know, there won't be such a pattern to work from. But I think sometimes, like, you know, I do believe that a lot about the Championship is about, you know, taking care of your own situation and preparing for yourself and how your team is, and focusing on yourself, because I think, you know, often the games aren't overly tactical. I don't feel that. I think they're very, very competitive. They tend to be, you know, very narrow score lines, a goal either way. And you know, we've always tried to focus on our team more than really what the opposition are about. And you know, we're well aware of the test that Millwall will present, but as I say, our focus this week has been on ourselves.
You already alluded to earlier in the conversation that it was frustrating second half of the season, particularly towards the end of it, but it was a strong finish by Millwall, wasn't it?
Yeah, they put together, you know, a strong period in that, you know, part of the season. I think in the early part of the season they had quite a lot of draws, and then they pushed themselves in a position where you know, they had something to play for in the final games of the season. Ultimately it proved to be out of their reach, and that's the difference. As I say, you know, I think that we were probably 3-4 games away from having the same situation to play for, and as we led into the end of the season. So, you know, those are things that hopefully as a group of players, although this is a very different group of players, we'll learn from as well.
But in previous season you've started well, haven't you? Unfortunately it didn't quite pan out the way you wanted to, and obviously a good start to the season is beneficial, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, of course it is. It's massive. You know, I think we started last season particularly well. We had 2 significant injuries without, you know, losing Harry as we did was a big blow to us. There's no doubt about that. And we had to compensate for that, you know, and we compensated that with the players that we brought to the club in January. We've tried to compensate with that again with what we've done in pre-season. So those are all factors that you have to deal with, you know, as I say. But, you know, there's no doubt that, you know, we would rather be a team that starts well and believes that we can continue with that, than a team that's obviously going to rely on, be strong in the second half of the season. I think for us as a team, we want to get in the front foot and get points on the board as quickly as we can.
And finally, from me, obviously, there's been some incomings. We likely to see any outgoings, Michael, before we get more incomings?
Well, I think the squad's pretty much at the numbers that we would like to see. There's one or two younger ones on the periphery that we think probably will either benefit from a permanent exit or a loan. We'll have a look at that. And but to add one or two more, we probably would need to see one or two leave the club as well. But if you look at us from possibly where we were, this time last year or the previous off season, we had a lot more numbers, higher numbers, and at a much greater cost to the football club than what we have now. So we're in the final stages of that, and I think what we have now is a highly motivated younger squad with a lot of parity financially, which I think is important as well.
Thank you, Michael.
One name that we haven't mentioned is Joe Allen, and he's been such a regular with Stoke for so many years. Do you feel you've brought in a set of players and a system that can replace Joe?
Well, I don't think Joe was obviously an important player for the club, and a player that came to the club, and a big signing in the Premier League, of course, and to play 6 years is testament to Joe. We played without Joe for considerable time as well when he had his Achilles injury in my first season here, and for a good part of the second season as well. So it's not something that we tried to replace him with any one particular player. I think at the end of the season we felt, having spoken to Joe and having pretty honest conversations, that possibly for him he needed a change, and obviously the opportunity, I think in his heart, Swansea was obviously where he would maybe see his career finishing, and that was where it started. So I totally understood that, and from that moment on we were basically we weren't looking to replace Joe, we were just looking to build a team. We'd brought Lewis Baker to the club. By January we'd seen Lewis have an extremely strong start to his Stoke career. We brought Josh Laurent in as well. Thompson and Clucas were still here, so we felt we'd cover him. We brought two, I think, exciting loan players in Gavin Kilkenny and Will Smallbone, who are, I think, both exciting young players that we won't compensate for Joe just with one player. Joe was part of the previous team, and this is a new team.
And you mentioned Will Smallbone there.
Yeah.
He certainly looked exciting in the opening friendlies.
Yeah, look, he's a player that has had a bit of an unfortunate time. He had a bad injury himself. He's obviously made his breakthrough at Southampton and played first team football there. He's an under-21 international with the Republic of Ireland as well. So I think what he's shown us in the short time that we've had him in the building is he's a talented boy. There's no doubt about that. You can see he has a natural ability to receive the ball and play. I think he's a player that supporters will like. He's got a little bit of what Mario had, to be honest, albeit he's at a much younger stage of his career as well. So he has got really good quality on the ball, and as I say, we're delighted to get him in, and we believe he can have a big impact.
How different would you say a player like Dwight Gale is to someone like Stephen Fletcher?
I think Dwight's a more dynamic player than Stephen was. He's obviously got an extremely strong record, particularly in the Championship, of scoring goals. I think he invigorates people around him. I think Fletch was different. He was more of a traditional number 9, so to speak. But probably when the second year for Stephen was more difficult. I think he had injuries, and that was the nature. Obviously, he was at a stage of his career where he's 35 at that point in time. I just think they're at different stages of their career as well. I think Dwight comes from having a frustrating time of not playing a lot of football in the last couple of years to really want to prove himself, and he's hungry to do it. The easier thing for Dwight to do would have been just to sit in his contract at Newcastle, and he chose not to do that. So I think that's always a good sign when a player does that.
Some exciting changes throughout the squad, but one place where you've sort of kind of stayed the same is in the goalkeeping spots. You're satisfied with your choices there?
Yeah, I think so. We weren't actively looking. Joe Bursick and Jack have given us good competition for the number one place, and Frankie Fielding is an excellent third choice backup, and it's one area where I think we looked at the development of the team, and we had to be, I think, selective where we put our resource, and we had to, we focused on at the top end of the pitch. That's where we feel will make the biggest difference to the team, and obviously, so Dwight coming in is a big plus. I think we've seen a good version of Tyrese in pre-season. He looks a lot better than he has done. After the injury, he looks a lot fitter. The benefit of pre-season, he looks back to himself in terms of his speed and his pace. Jacobs obviously had a very good season last season, 14 league goals. So again, we just want to make sure that the competition at the top end of the pitch is and we're as strong at the top end of the pitch as we can be, because if we look at last season, the games we drew, games we felt we should have won, and we lost games that we certainly felt that at least we should have drawn, and often that is because of what we had at the top end of the pitch. No disrespect to the players, I just believe that if we can be as strong as we can be in that area, that will give us the opportunity obviously to win more games.
I was going to say, you've just seen a couple of really exciting goals from Tyrese Campbell, so you're expecting more of that, are you?
Of course, yeah. Look, Tyrese was he was in a great spot before he picked up the injury, but that's 18 months ago now, so we need to see, he has to be over that. He has to go and prove himself again. I think he's got his head down. He's worked extremely hard in pre-season. I think he looks in good condition, and he's taken 2 very good chances in the games that he's taken, and it's up to us to create opportunities for him as well. I think Tyrese is a player that can score goals himself. He can score goals out of very little as well, and I think game by game there's more and more confidence coming back into his game.